Hello and welcome to TALRadio. At TAL, we connect those who are willing to give to those who are in need. My lovely audience and my lovely listeners, you're watching and listening to a wonderful series called Self-Coaching. And today, we would be talking about one very interesting topic, handling conflict, constructive conflict resolution. So let's welcome Andrew Tallents on TALRadio. Andrew, welcome to TALRadio.
Thank you, Sandy. It's lovely to be here again.
Thank you so much. And before we head off, I must wish all our lovely listeners a very, very happy 2026. All right. So let me start by asking you, Andrew, that why do you think conflict is often seen as something that we need to avoid rather than something that we really need to work through? And what it really costs? I mean, what kind of effect does it have on individuals and on the teams altogether?
Yeah, it's a really interesting subject. Even people that have started listening to this just now will start to be feeling a little bit uneasy about the word conflict, and it's very normal for human beings to feel like that. So I think the first thing to say is conflict is seen as a negative word because we obviously associate conflict with wars, with major differences between economies. But actually, if you actually think about conflict in a positive sense, all it means really is two parties in disagreement. They're not really agreeing, they're not in alignment, they're not in agreement. So therefore, there's a real opportunity within that. So I think why so many people get a bit frustrated or nervous about conflict is they immediately think that they're going to have to go into defensive mode and feel as though they're going to have to defend a position. That's just a mindset, which we're going to come on to later. So the real value in any conflict is it breeds innovation. Because if you've got one idea and I've got another idea and we don't agree, and yet we can find what we've got in common ground between each other, it means we're probably going to come up with something new that neither of us thought of in the first place. So any business, any community, any country out there, even two people will always benefit from conflict. It's human nature that gets in the way because we just don't feel comfortable with it sometimes, having to disagree with people and defend a position. So we'll come on to that later about why it adds value.
My God, I think this is something that is really new for me, and I'm sure for all the audience, that conflict is something that literally leads to something. It's a disagreement that leads to something new. And we do not need to really take out our guns and hold grudges onto each other because of that. Lovely. So moving on, in your experience as a coach, what are the most common root causes of a conflict at a leadership level? Because you really work with leaders all across the globe. So is it ego? Is it miscommunication, values, or the pressure they have, to run a company or an organization? Like, what exactly it is?
It can be all of those, but to summarize what it tends to be, let's say it's 6 people, 8 people, 60 people, doesn't really matter. Normally, it means that everybody is thinking at this point that we are in some kind of agreement or alignment in relation to a particular topic or focus. Somebody there says something and you think, hold on a minute, that doesn't seem to be in alignment with what I thought we were all in agreeing. And nobody says anything at that point. And therefore, there's miscommunication, there's misunderstanding, there's a lack of clarity, and therefore we start to make assumptions and we don't immediately ask in the moment, what did you just say there? Could you clarify that? That's not what I thought. We just don't say anything. So where a lot of the conflict appears in leadership teams around the world is that misalignment, which is being misunderstood, and we don't even communicate it. So that's what tends to happen, and the things that can lead to that are all the terms that you've just referenced. And there are ways to get around it, which we'll come to later, but it happens every single day. It's a very British thing to do as well. I know it's probably the same in a lot of countries where we're so polite and we know we're in disagreement with someone, but we don't want to say anything.
That's so lovely to accept it. So moving on, how can we tell the difference between a healthy conflict that drives growth and a conflict that is destructive in nature and certainly gets on to almost kind of a clash that probably lasts a lifetime?
We talked about this a little bit in our previous episode, Sandy, and the best way to describe this is about where the feeling comes from when I disagree with you. So if the feeling of anger, frustration, misunderstanding, anxiety, negativity is driving my conflict with you, and therefore I'm disagreeing with you, that usually is going to lead to a bad outcome because of where it's coming from the human. If, however, I'm going to disagree with you from a place of calmness, serenity, peace, reflection, curiosity, and I really want to seek your views, then that's going to come from a very, very different place, and you will receive that differently. It won't be coming from this kind of angry type of defensive position. So one of the ways to notice whether it's healthy is in the actual disagreement and conflict itself, how much defensiveness does it feel in that particular relationship? And if it doesn't, it can lead to great places of innovation and better ideas. And if it does feel defensive, it's just going to go round and round and round and round and spiral very quickly to where people just can't agree and walk away, which happens all the time.
That's true. And that really takes me to another point. I mean, it could be out of context, but is it really why countries have diplomats? To avoid this conflict?
It is. So behind the scenes, so obviously you've got the world leaders who are disagreeing with each other and showboating and showing these sort of power plays, and then behind the scenes you've got the diplomats who are coming from a very different place. Absolutely. And that's why they serve that purpose behind the scenes, and that's where we see the best results. And one of the things we can do as human beings is, as soon as we hear somebody disagreeing with us, is just be curious about where it is they're coming from, and we'll come to later about how we do this in terms of techniques. But even if we just ask that question, oh, tell me more about that, or what was your reasoning behind that, or how did you come to that conclusion? It sometimes just makes us feel less defensive because we're just trying to find out more about their position.
So being less defensive is the key here.
Yeah.
So moving on, Andrew, could you share, okay, so there are like two stories here now that I would really want you to share examples of. One is, where a conflict was handled so well that it really led to a breakthrough or probably a beautiful solution came out of it. Whereas avoiding it really made things worse.
Yeah, there's lots of examples of the second one, so I'll start there. Where does it make things worse? What we tend to find happen in a lot of companies, and you'll see this in the companies that you know as well, is you can feel it in the culture that there is misalignment. So behind the leader's back, people are talking about them, they're saying negative things, they're actually saying one thing and doing another. And what we tend to find there is conflict which appears in situations where people don't even see it coming. So that tends to happen a lot. And in one particular situation I found recently, because people weren't talking to each other about the conflicts, they were just hiding from it and in denial. It all blew up in one big meeting where the leader just had enough and walked out, came back about 3 hours later. But in terms of the actual disagreement within the team at that point, there's just no way they can move forward. So that's when people are not being open and honest with their disagreements, and they just keep them internal in that sense. Where it tends to work very well is where we actually agree that there's a conflict and a disagreement. It calls for strong leadership. And what the leader does is just does a timeout, does a pause and say, look, I can see we're all in disagreement here. What we all need here is an anchor to what we are actually in service of. So, for example, for a company that is actually servicing, consumers around a product like a phone or whatever it might be, let's actually just think about the customer right now, and let's think about all the viewpoints that we have, and let's take them back to the customer. What would the customer say about the kind of conversations we're having right now? And that usually is a very, very good focal point, which is objective, which can take then all the views to come to a different conclusion. So that's what great teams do. They actually have a reference point, which is usually the customer or an internal customer, that they can take all these different views and focus. The former experience I talked about is so common where people just don't talk about it and avoid it.
That's very true. I think 90% of the time that's what really happens.
Yes,
people just
absolutely.
Walk away.
Either do.
Moving on, whenever there's a conflicting situation, emotions are running really high. It's like end of the world as if. So what do you think, in your opinion, people can take some practical steps that can really help to de-escalate the situation and still be stuck to the real issue and not ponder around it, like just moving away from it?
There's a lovely piece of work by Byron Katie, which the listeners and viewers might want to look up. And Byron Katie wrote a book called 4 Questions. And what she says, if you're in this situation you describe about, you described there is, as you're feeling this negativity, because that's what tends to be with conflict that we're not comfortable with, it's negative energy that we feel, is to ask the first question, which is, what I'm feeling right now, is it real? Is it fabricated? Is it something I put into my head, or is it really real? And that gives me a bit of space for me to start thinking about what I'm feeling negative about. The second question that she asked, which is a lovely question, is it really real? So you really ask yourself the same question, is it really real? Because of course it's not real, we're just really associating and attaching to it. And the third question is lovely because she talks about the fact, asking ourselves at that point, as we're feeling right now in conflict and this negativity, who would we be if we didn't feel like this right now? And what's possible if we didn't feel like this right now? And it starts to free up the energy to be something different in that moment and see the other person's perspective. And then the fourth question she asks is, what step can you take right now? So it's a really lovely thing that you can do very quickly. It doesn't take too long to do that, because as soon as we feel that negativity and that anger and that frustration, we really believe it's real. It must be real. We've been outdone here and there's something not quite right. So that's a really good way for doing it. And also, we've talked about the past of just taking a breath, changing energy, shifting our position, movement, just so we can move out of that energy that we're in. And then all we can do then is see how the other person responds in that moment.
You said just 4 questions. I mean, the name of the book is like 4 questions, I believe.
Yeah, 4 questions.
It literally seems like, the life is really revolving around those 4 questions as well.
Absolutely, because nothing's real. It's all in our heads.
Absolutely. So moving on, it is said, I don't know if it is true or not, that active listening really plays a big role in resolving a conflict. Now, what in your opinion does it really do, and how can people practice it? Because that's the toughest part.
It is really hard. So it links into your previous question. So the best way to try and practice this is with your partner or with a good friend or somebody at work that you're really close to, who you have regular disagreements with. It could be about politics, it could be sport, it could be about friendships, values, whatever it might be. Is to test yourself that when you're in that particular situation, just start to think about, okay, how can I change this now, change this energy by asking certain questions? So it comes back to the point we talked about before. It's about presence, which we've talked a lot about in our series. So in the moment, being present, connecting with the fact that we want to find the gift in this particular opportunity right now, and putting ourselves in the other person's shoes. There's a lovely technique we can use where we really listen with intent to what the other person's saying, because we want to understand where they're coming from. And there's a technique we can use called the and technique. So the and technique is, you've just said something, and rather than me disagree with you at this point, even though we've got different views, I'm going to find one thing I can agree with, and I'm going to say, Sandy, I don't agree with everything that you said, but actually what you said there, I think is right, and then I add to it, I build to it. And what we have then is this lovely technique of actually finding something we can agree with, and guess what? We can actually agree with more than we think. To begin with. So it's about presence, really listening, finding something you can agree with, focus on that, and then build on it. And eventually you'll come to a solution because you're not focused on what you disagree with.
Well, that's so lovely to hear that a filler like and can really do so much.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not but, you see, it's and. So it's really acknowledging, I hear you and there's something in your argument, but actually now my view is.
All right. That's very enlightening, basically, I would say. So, and moving on. So, for example, in most of the conflict, we see there's a kind of a power imbalance. For example, there's a leader, then there's a team, or there's a parent, and there's a child. So how does one approach conflict in this kind of situation and try to resolve it?
I think this is one of the most difficult situations. We've all experienced this where we've got a power play, somebody who has authority over us, who is actually using that authority in a conflict situation and can lead sometimes to abusive type natures when we see it in politics every single day. So I think the only options that we have open to us at that point is to really ask the question from a very adult perspective about, bear in mind what you've just said to me in terms of what it is that you want me to do, which is obviously something we're disagreeing with. Can you give me some options in the way that can be done? So we're looking at different ways in which they're communicating to us it can be done. So we're looking for different ways out, really. would you be open to me coming back to you with a different way of doing this? And then maybe thinking about different solutions. So when we're in a power play, it's really, really hard. And all we can do is go to curiosity again to try and find a different solution. It's very hard for many people out there when you're dealing with a leader like that, because they're just going to abuse their power play position.
True.
What you can also do is look for allyship. And this is a lovely term where there's people around you who you know actually have more influence with that particular leader that's using the power play. And you can work together as a team to try and dissipate again the conflict situation that's being driven by that individual. So I think of all the things we've talked about today and in previous weeks, that's probably one of the hardest situations to deal with.
Absolutely, especially when people have the power to chuck you out of the organization.
Absolutely.
I think that's what it's all about. So moving on, what does accountability look like in a conflict? Because we do know that no matter where and in between what kind of people the conflict is, both the parties feel that they are right.
They do. And what I love about this, again, it links to the and, is when you speak, there's at least 2% of what you're saying that I can agree with and that I can feel that I can actually commit to. Usually at least 2%, even if I disagree with everything else. So it's finding that 2%, and then it's building from there, but it's holding each other to account to say, well, actually, if we were to be like this again in a week's time when we were disagreeing about this, how are we going to go about it in terms of us getting to a solution as opposed to just getting in a negative situation? So what it might be, for example, I had a client who did this about 2 years ago. He was very uncomfortable in dealing with conflict in the moment. And what he decided to do was agree with the other person that he was always disagreeing with to say, if we have a disagreement, what I'd like to do is actually stop and pause there, go away and reflect, the two of us, and then the following day, meet at 9 o'clock to actually talk about it from a position of actually having reflected overnight. And I think that worked really well. It's really, you've got to be accountable to keep follow-up. Don't avoid it, but just defer. And he found that having that reflection period meant they could both come in and be a little bit more clear as opposed to just being angry or frustrated. And so that's a way that people can hold each other to account. The other thing is just don't avoid it. It's okay to defer it, but just walking away and letting it just fester is the worst thing that we can do. Sometimes it's good to seek a mediator. So if you and I cannot agree and we're always disagreeing, bringing a third party in who actually can see both sides can usually act as a catalyst for us to coming to an agreement. So that's another good way to look at accountability.
Thanks for mentioning the beautiful story of a client of yours, that he would just pause there at the moment, defy it at the moment, but still come back the next day at 9 a.m. to resolve it. So that's certainly a wonderful leader. But do you feel that what kind of other habits can leaders really inculcate in the team so that there's a healthy conflict and there's a resolution out of it?
There's a really lovely technique which was designed by Nancy Klein in her book, Time to Think, which is a lovely book. And particularly in teams, one of the ways that you can really practice what you've described is, as the leader of the team, is to actually set up your meeting if you've got something to discuss which is quite difficult subject. It might be options for growth, it might be options for downsizing, options for product development, whatever it might be, where there's a lot of disagreement, a lot of different views. And her technique is that, let's say you've got 6 people in the room, you give each person 5 minutes to speak without interruption about what their view is. So you just go around the room, every person has their 5 minutes, nobody can interrupt. And of course, everyone is listening when people speak. And then it comes round to that person again who's just spoken. So it's the 7th time that somebody's spoken. And they have already got all the insights from everybody else. And then they go around again and they speak for 5 minutes talking about their view and taking in other views. So if it's really managed very well, the problem with a lot of conflict that isn't resolved is because people get interrupted and cannot finish their arguments off. If we hear the arguments in full, we see both sides a rounded argument and we can come to conclusions. So it calls for careful facilitation by the leader, giving space and time, and then having a way to come to consensus. That might be sometimes just voting. It might be about prioritizing, but it's got to act in an adult way, really. And so many boards and leadership teams act like children in terms of shouting over each other. It's a really lovely technique to make sure that people can come to resolution. Being heard.
Now I think I really realized that one of my ex-bosses used to practice the same thing, that he would let everybody speak like uninterrupted for 5 minutes. And it really helped us a lot at that moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's certainly something that probably, everybody should practice.
Right.
So moving on, we're really coming to the last leg of this wonderful episode. And thankfully, we do not have a conflict. So, but there's one thing that I would really like to know, and I'm sure our listeners are very keen to understand, because everybody goes through this kind of a phase in every day, you could say, of their lives. If there is one mindset shift or a tool the listeners can apply immediately right now at this moment to handle conflict more constructively in their lives or in their organization, what would that be?
A lovely question. I would say it's very important for you, if you're feeling negative about a situation where there's conflict, to recognize that you're the one that's been impacted by that, and yet the intention from the other person might not have been to affect you with the impact that it has. So we've got to have this mindset to say, it's me that's got the problem in the way I'm feeling about this, not necessarily the person I'm in conflict with. So a technique we can use is, let's say that you and I had a conflict and it was maybe 2 weeks ago. I can use a lovely technique called COIN. So it's the acronym COIN, COIN. And what it stands for is in the discussion with the other person that you want to talk about the conflict from the past, you start with the C of COIN, which is context. So you give the other person the context, you tell them about what happened, when it happened, and what your recollection of it was. So you give the context of that particular session, the meeting. The second thing is the O for observation. And what we say here is, what I observed is that you, Sandy, may have interrupted me in front of an important stakeholder, and that's what I observed happening. So we explain what we observed. So it's very, very unemotional at this point. Important bit, we say the I, which is impact. So what we say is, because you did that, the impact it had on me was to make me feel as though I wasn't important enough to get my view across because you interrupted me. And that made me feel negative, and not that I was participating in the meeting as I should have done. That was the impact it had on me. So I'm not saying that you made me feel like that. It was me that felt like that. So that's the impact. And then we go on to the N, which is next. So I say to you, next time, Sandy, if we're in a meeting together and we've got a point going ahead and I'm talking, I prefer it if you didn't interrupt me and let me finish my point, because that would allow me to feel as though I'm contributing. So the COIN technique you can use in any conflict situation live at that time where it's just happened, or from the past, and it allows you to have a very non-emotional, non-emotive, very kind of rational discussion with the other person about what you prefer them to do next time. Now, just remember, just because you prefer them to do it doesn't mean they're going to do it, but at least you're explaining to them how it is. So it's a lovely way to deal with conflict, and you can read more about that on the web and how to use the technique every day.
Lovely. So on that beautiful COIN note, or the context, I'm going to wrap up this lovely segment of this wonderful series called Self-Coaching. So Andrew, thank you so much for being with us and basically deep diving into this beautiful topic of conflict. And I hope our listeners really take amazing things and stop conflicting with their team members or at their household. Thank you so much, everyone, and keep on listening to TALRadio.